stay on afterwards.
Don't stay on?
Stay on.
Oh,
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Soul Creativity. I'm so excited for tonight or today's show. And we have a really great guest. I want to mention before we get started, if you were trying to watch last week, we were scheduled to have Wade F. Forrest, the writer and actor, and we had a glitch. So luckily, Wade was able to reschedule, and he will be on next Thursday. So without further ado, I'm really excited to welcome Kim Colwell. And Kim, we have such an exciting and I think important and interesting information for this evening's show. So I want to welcome you and welcome everyone else into the studio. And we have the live chat up. So if you have any questions or comments for Kim during the show, if I see them there, Kim, I will pass them along so that we can respond to them. I know
that
that
sounds
we had
great.
some people waiting for your episode. So I had been putting out, and you and I had talked about how your specialty is transformative interior design. And I was wondering if you could first explain that to us. And I like that word with interior having sort of a double meaning, with the interior of the spaces we occupy, but also the interior inside of us. And I think that you address that. So I find that very interesting.
I love that. First of all, Naven, thank you so much for having me. And transformative interior design essentially encompasses my whole background, really starting as a little girl, which is so neat for me to say. It encompasses my formal and experiential study of environmental psychology and my background as a fine artist and illustrator, which I made my career in for about 10 years in my 20s. And that evolved into creating cartoons. So, really looking at space as a full world rather than a room or a
Mhm.
house or a business. And then also including my lifelong tutelage under my mother, Melinda Joy Miller, who you've interviewed.
Yes.
And it's been an amazing pleasure to have my mother really also as a mentor since I was a very
Mhm.
little girl, studying everything from feng shui to all of her work as a medicine person, from the medicine wheel of peace, which is another system very similar to feng shui, but its own system in itself, really through the Native American view.
Mhm.
Specifically, hers comes through the lineage of the Seneca Nation. And from that system comes shamanic astrology, which is a way of working with color that looks at specific colors that are innate to us as individuals, some of which hold us in balance and support our innate sense of being and wellness, and some of which that may even take us out of balance when we have an abundance of those colors. Um, as well as many different healing modalities, and of course, the clearing of space. I myself I haven't been drawn to do clearing. I've always brought my mother in to do that, but I've studied the principles for years and years and years and taken the classes, and all of them have different threads in the making of transformative or transformational interior design, which I would also say transformative feng shui. When I'm just seeing, people for a couple of hours, there's still an application that doesn't have to be full service interior design, which I think I'd love for just all of us to think about. These same principles can be applied to your existing home without having a big remodel or having a tremendous upheaval. You can essentially apply it to whatever principles you would like, but it's looking at the space therapeutically, how does the environment affect our mental state of being?
Mhm.
How could there be hidden triggers that exist in the space that may be triggering stress that we're totally unaware of? Even in a beautiful space with no clutter, there may be something going on within the space that has to do with our level of anxiety. It may be impacting our relationship with our spouse, our roommate, our family dynamics. There
Mhm.
may be an influence on our sleep, our state of joy, our happiness, our sense of self, self-esteem, lack of self-esteem. All of the space essentially absorbs our inner life and who we are, and then influences our inner life and who we are.
Kim, do you think that, first of all, 2 points. One, when I was talking with your mom and we were talking about gardening, I was asking her about if you have a small space. And so I think sometimes, working within a small space is difficult, especially in a home where, probably a lot of us have too much stuff to fit in the
Yeah,
home.
of
And
course.
also, I was wondering if you could address, different
Small
types of
places.
spaces. And then
Sure.
also, in talking about how we decorate and arrange the outer space affects us, as you were saying, our mental health and our well-being, especially emotionally. And how do you think that our inner um, emotions or state, if we're out of balance, because we were talking just briefly there, you mentioned color, how do we influence the space around us? If somebody else is coming into our space and we're out of balance internally. Um,
Oh, how do we influence visiting a friend, you mean?
well,
Ourselves?
yeah, or even somebody coming into our space, I think we're influenced by how we have our outer space arranged, colors and different things like that. And then also, I think we affect our outer space by our inner feelings as well.
Well,
And so I'm
let's
wondering if you address that, if you, when,
let's break it down. So let's start with small space living. So
mhm,
um, I agree. It's funny because a smaller place is often far more complicated in terms
mhm,
of the game of chess that you play than a larger space. Not always. I mean, there are complications with every space, even when I do new construction. And I had years ago a complex that I was consulting on. It was a complex of condominiums in Mexico, and it was just a piece of land. There was no structure yet. They brought me in prior to the architect, so I essentially gave them kind of a template for everybody to work within in terms of how to set things up. So even with that, the land in itself dictates a number of things. How is the water running down the, in that case, it was a mountainside. There you on look to water. What direction are you facing? What can we do in terms of the floor plan with the square footage allotted based on their bottom line and their development, their understanding of the development team in terms of what they need to make back on those condominiums. So in other words, there are always a number of factors that we have to work within and compromise. With a small space, you have a lot more going on in an individual room than a larger space. So, what I would say, some rules of thumb to just consider with a small space would be, let's again look at it psychologically, energetically, and artistically. So I'm always looking from those three perspectives. For me, that's what equals transformative design or anything that's transformative with space. So, number one, keeping a small space neat and uncluttered is probably the most important thing. Having even a couple of items out in a smaller space, you feel it, sense
mhm,
it, and see it much more so, of course. And that's something we could all think of logically.
Mm-hmm.
We want to give a small space the same thought to the floor plan as we would any space, be it a larger space. So if we think about what gives us a more expansive feel, well, you can think about mirrors. Let's look at mirrors from a design standpoint and from an energetic standpoint and a psychological standpoint. So let's say you have someone in a small space that is emotionally gets overwhelmed very easily.
Mm-hmm.
A mirror, for instance, is a great design solution to open up the space. Why? Because it bounces the light. You immediately bring more light into the space with the mirror there. And then the most obvious, you look into a mirror, it looks like the room goes from here to here immediately when you see it. So when you have that, you want to think about, well, what else does a mirror do? Let's look at it shamanically. A mirror, if you think shamanically, it can essentially make the room feel too frenetic. Or let's look at it, you could say just energetically rather than shamanically. Looking at it from a feng shui standpoint, you may be creating too much energy for the room. You also, with a mirror, have to be cognizant of, is it okay for someone who would be getting overwhelmed has a capacity to get overwhelmed or overtly stressed out? A mirror, or too much mirror, I should say, not having mirrors, we can all have mirrors, but having too much mirror could actually stimulate that emotion. Okay. If you look at it in terms of the shamanic astrology, the mirrors representing water. So if you have a fire person, that may be creating an imbalance. So you could also use the mirror to make more energy when the energy is stagnant. Or you could bring more vitality to the space or even ground the space. Mirrors are probably the most dynamic, but they do go a long way to bouncing light and kind of giving us that expansive feel. You just have to be aware of all of the different things that a mirror can do. Other rules of thumb would be keep a lower profile to the furniture. By doing so, you immediately trick the spatial perception so that the ceiling feels higher. Okay. Doing more legs on furniture rather than furniture going straight down to the ground immediately also flips that spatial perspective, and it gives you a wider, it enhances the expansive feeling in the room right away, because you can visually see the floor and then the furniture. It just psychologically, we do something with our spatial perspective right in that moment that's different than the furniture that goes all the way down to the floor, and that creates a bit more of a wall. So it's something to just consider. And really, there are a number of factors that are beneficial for all of us. I would say that one of the key components for everything that I do with space is considering who that person is. What is going on in the space, whether they were there or not? What is going on with that person, regardless of what space they may be in? And then what are they doing in the space? What are their decisions? What type of furniture, and how is that furniture placed? How are those decorative items placed? So in a small space, it's vitally important to get the artwork, let's say, to be cohesive, no dissonance. I see all the time wonderful collections of art, but the art doesn't work in the room with the other items or with each other, or the art looks great in the room and with one another with the other pieces of art, but one is too high, one is too low, one you can't really get to with your eyes. That makes us feel unstable on a subconscious basis. It's like all our spaces are almost acting like subliminal messages for our subconscious mind to relate to and then react to, but we're unaware because it's living in our subconscious. So when you start analyzing the space, you start to see these things. And if you're in a small space, the more you can, for instance, put one horizon line going through all art, even if you have an art wall, let's say you have 5 paintings on a wall and it looks really neat, think of them as one painting and put one line going through that collection as well as your larger pieces, and that will immediately calm the whole environment down, which is really, again, extra important in every space, but extra important in a small space.
Exactly. And I would think that's important for someone who has to spend a lot of time. If somebody's more homebound, say, than someone who's getting out a lot, you really want to be careful of that space. And that makes me think about what you had mentioned earlier about space and our mental health. And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit, because what you were just saying about decorating and placing, how we place things, it really made a lot of sense. And like you said, these are things we probably aren't aware of or didn't even think about, how our space is feeding into our emotions all the time in an unaware, not in, noticeable to our senses of like sight and sound, but more internal.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So with design and mental health, or let's just say space and mental health, could we do a little exercise? I'm just thinking of this on the fly, and it will just take a few minutes, but I'd love for us to just take a moment, and I want to do this exercise as a context to answer that question, just to think about things differently, and then I'll go through certainly that question. I'd love for everyone to think about, let's just pick one room. Let's all think about our bedrooms. Whether you're in your bedroom, you're not in your bedroom, you could be at the office right now, wherever you are, let's just think in our mind's eye about our bedroom. And let's take a moment and think of going into our bedroom, but here's the caveat. This is going into a room where we don't know this person. So imagine 2 things. One, your own bedroom. And the second component is I'd like you to think about entering your bedroom as a stranger, as a complete stranger. You don't know this person at all. And you're just literally, if you can, and don't worry, if you can't connect to both, it's all right. Let's just do this quick experiment, and it will just give us all a way to think. Just open us up a little bit to the notion of how space affects our mental health. So let's take a moment and close our eyes and just connect with yourself. And keeping your eyes closed, I'd like for us all to enter into your bedroom in your mind's eye. And again, we're entering this bedroom as a stranger in a place that, we'll have to use our imagination, imagining that we've never been in it before. And I want you to just look around. What do you notice? What do you feel when you're standing in the room? How do you feel? Is there anything that comes up that you sense? What do you see? Do you notice art? on the wall? Do you notice the lack of art on the wall? Is there a lot going on? Is there very little going on? What's the impression that this room is making on you? Who is this person? What are your thoughts? Who do you think this person or these people who live in this bedroom, who do you think they may be? You just take a moment, give that some thought, and jot down in your mind anything notable. And when you're ready, let's open our eyes. So, Naven, to quickly turn a question back to you, and I promise I will address your question next. Did anything come up for you?
Yes, and I wouldn't even like speak to my bedroom right now. And as I was doing that, it just like all my bedrooms ran back through my mind that I've occupied. And I was back to a really early bedroom. The one that I'm in now, I it's a mess because I have pulled out all this stuff from closets that I was going to do all these projects. And I was looking for something. So I was thinking to myself, my gosh, if someone walked in there right now, they would probably feel uncomfortable because it's too cluttered. There's no walking space, and it's not put together and it's not like decorated. It would just look like, boy, this isn't a good this isn't a good place because it has other storage stuff in it. And so really very interesting to me as I was going back, I was thinking, I think I'd have to go all the way back to when I very first got married to find a bedroom that I had put together and like decorated where it wasn't something that I also had to try to store, some stuff in. And in that bedroom, I would walk in and say like, oh, this looks new. This looks like somebody just decorated it, just designed it. And so that one had like a kind of nice feeling. But, so I may not be the best person to be using, and I'm not sure what that says about me. But I didn't often have a bedroom, I think, where I could really think of it as, decorating it and art. And it was more like, what do I have to put in here to make space? I am in a very small house right now, and that's part of the problem. Though the storage for a small house, I have to say, it does have good storage space, pretty good. It's just that I just made a big mess of things, by working on a project. So I'm going to invite anyone listening in, if you want to make a comment, to let Kim know it might be better, but that is a really good thing. And, it's making me also think about my own, sleep, and just walking in and out of there is a little annoying right now.
Well, first of all, let's just say all of us humans are going to have times where our environment gets chaotic. When we are going through a stressful time or a home project, or just when we're feeling overwhelmed, we're going to immediately start to act out in our space. And that acting out is often shown with clutter. Having a small space, sometimes you just simply have too many things. There are a number of ways that you can work with that. But I want to just say that exercise gets us to be more objective with our space. A lot of things can be remedied with objectivity. when you're looking at your space with new eyes, and you didn't realize, wow, I have this type of symbol that's running all throughout my space, or I'm an artist and I have all my unfinished paintings around me and I always feel like I can never get my artwork done. Or, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that I have so way too light in my space, and maybe I should add, if I can't get natural light in, maybe I should start to really think about adding more artificial light in interesting ways. So, when you talk about sleep, that's really interesting in itself. We know that right now in the world, LED lights have been a thing.
Right.
There was a time when the code changed. I remember I was working on a jewelry store, and my client had like sometimes like $1 million bracelet, and the code had changed to only fluorescent lighting, and LEDs that were very, very white light. So you can't really light jewelry that way. So we got an allowance in that case to do metal halides at the time. Now there's so much innovation. You can do the LED lights and be more sustainable in your thinking because of the temperature. Well, the white light actually affects our melatonin. So having too many white lights or blue tone lights, like on our devices, that would be considered a blue light, that blue undertone. Certainly the devices, the televisions, etc., but also find that on DVR. You find that in just sometimes just a decorative light that has an LED with a higher, I always get confused with, I think it's the higher temperature with a more white light rather than the warmer tone. And all of that can affect your sleep. How are you placing your dressing mirror? If you have a mirror in your bedroom, where that's placed has a lot to do with it. So in feng shui, I almost always put a mirror to the left of the door because that gets the energy to go more in a clockwise fashion. Whereas putting a mirror on the right side will get it to go more counterclockwise, which immediately creates an undertone to the environment that feels more chaotic. Again, in our subconscious, or the way that if we really kind of sense the space. But I also invite you just went through a journey of thinking back to, your inclination was to go back to a place where you felt better. And so that is a subtlety to how environment affects our mental health, but one that I think would be neat for you to reflect on, to how you can go back to that place that you just described and start mapping that out for your bedroom or any room in your home. There are lots of things you can do for space. For instance, I'm looking at your bookshelf behind you. You can actually go into the wall by about 3.5 inches and create bookshelves. You could have little ledges if you need more depth than that, which you often do with a book's depth. But you can make the room. You can see this is a niche behind me. So in a small space, this is a great example of how something that goes into the wall, it immediately opens things up. Now, if I wanted to, I could put a neat cabinet door on this niche, and now I have storage.
I can't tell you, you can't do that with this wall, because I was gonna put shelves up, but there's no joint, it's just
no studs.
There's no studs in
no
this wall.
posts. Okay. Well, then, a quick thing, and not, so I don't know what room you're in now, Naven. This could be your office. So I'm not suggesting this for your office. I quite love looking at your books and your things. I think that's really, it's appealing, and I really love it. But let's just say hypothetically that was your bedroom for just a moment, just for the sake of our discussion. Putting doors on your bookshelf is another way to do it.
Right.
Essentially, there's so many beautiful textiles, having a beautifully done curtain as you would a window treatment, making it look tailored. You could even do a beautiful Roman shade that goes up and down. All of those things immediately make it feel like there's less stuff in the room when there's too much stuff. And so that's going back to our small place. And then mentally, it helps to calm us down.
Yeah.
When I think of the mental health, so, every single one of us has a place, color, decorative style, be it as eclectic as fusing 10 different styles together or one particular aspect that they resonate with, that is healthy for us. And sometimes it's not as healthy. So you could have an introvert in an environment that it feels too exposed. And I don't mean necessarily an open floor plan versus a compartmentalized one. That's certainly a big consideration, one that I look at quite a lot in terms of who this person is and how they feel connected to the world, etc. Sometimes it's a matter of, are you with an expansive view, or are you in more of a lowland, environment where so all of these things affect our mental health in different ways, but everybody's different. So let's say you have a couple, one person may excel in an environment that is, actually, I have an example. There's Los Angeles. They live at the top of a hill in a beautiful, very modern, open floor plan home. And essentially, he excels there. He feels in charge. They're on the top of the hill. It's in an area called Beechwood Canyon in the Los Angeles area. They're at the top of the hill, and he feels like he's in charge of the world. She feels overwhelmed, like she's in a fishbowl, and essentially isolated from the world. Two different people in the same very beautiful house. I didn't detect or see, a lot of clutter. I'm sure clutter happens for all of us humans at times. But what I'm getting to is all of us have a different calibration. So, we could analyze, well, what calibration is best for each of us based on the same types of ways that we create subconscious patterns from our childhood dynamics that play out in our relationships in our life. If you're looking at things just through a basic sense of psychology, we do that with our space. Now, sometimes we have a propensity to select spaces that are really healthy for us. They put us in our stride. They make us happy. And sometimes we have a propensity to keep ourselves in old patterns and select a space where we're kind of acting out a pattern that maybe is more anything from painful to not as healthy, and anything in between. So if we look at mental health, and let's just take depression, one example I would give is or self-esteem, even in connection with depression. Let's say you've had the same environment for a long time, and it may have either never really articulated who you are in an innate sense. For instance, sometimes people keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. They think, oh, I need to have this type of space, and they kind of ignore aspects. They may be in a more conservative environment, but they have a very playful side, but they've ignored that playful side because no, they're supposed to have this, and they're not supposed to have too much color because you're not supposed to do XYZ. You're not supposed to be outlandish. I have a client, I'm finishing her house in Florida, and I've done it all over Zoom. And I hadn't been to her neighborhood, But we were talking the other day, and we were doing we had finished the interior mostly, and we were doing some things in her exterior lanais. And we were doing some things that I didn't think were too outlandish. I mean, I guess I do live in Los Angeles, and I went to NYU, so I feel like, I don't think of that in those terms. But we were like putting an outdoor rug on the wall as art, just being creative. And her neighbors were up and like just going crazy. Why would you? I don't understand. It's different. And she said there was a part of her that thought, her initial feelings were, oh, it's so beautiful, it looks so great. But then she started, oh my goodness, but wait, but you're not supposed to. And it was a whole inner dialogue that it's a vacation home for them, and her husband just came. They live most of the time in Montana, and they're just a beautiful couple. And he came back, and I think he really loves all the decisions in the space. And I think that's kind of given her a recalibration to feel like, wait, but that if you're keeping up with the Joneses, or you're creating decisions for your space that are to please the outside world, or of what you should be, what is that doing? That is stimulating a self-esteem issue. It's certainly not stimulating empowerment. Now, I'm not saying you should be your most outlandish and
right.
Of course, we want to be cognizant to feeling comfortable, not going too far out of our comfort zone, but we also want to be brave to be ourselves.
Right.
That balance and how the decisions in the space affect our mental wellness is important. I have a client who had gone through the loss of her son and her husband, both of whom were living in the home. Her son had moved back, and he was going through an illness, and you can just only imagine how painful those life transitions are. And when I came to the house for the first time, she had come to a lecture on feng shui, and she had me do a feng shui consultation. And I initially, in that consultation, helped her to realize that she was holding herself in this trauma. Both traumas, I don't remember the exact time frame, but they had happened, I think one a year and one a few years prior to when I met her. But the home was a living, breathing home of trauma. And so by being in that home, it was keeping her in that trauma. There were 3 rooms that she was not to go into when she was married. And I can speak, of course, would never mention her name because of be very confidential, but she's also come publicly to speak at a talk a few years after we were finished with her project, because it ended up going from a feng shui consultation to an extensive remodel. And initially, there were 3 rooms. She and her husband, prior to his passing, were living in or sleeping in separate bedrooms. There were 2 guest bedrooms and 1 primary bedroom with its own primary bathroom. She had chosen, after both of them had passed, to continue to sleep outside of the primary bedroom, not using the primary bathroom, and sleeping in the bedroom that her son had passed away in. There were 2 rooms, one right off of the foyer, where her husband had taken over. It was a den, and that he would come home after work and he would watch television in that room. But it was a wide opening. It wasn't a doorway. It was probably a 10-foot opening. So you could see that room, all of that room, as you come through the foyer. It did have a wall partially on it, but mostly exposed. And then the office that was off of the garage was also his office that she was not to go into. So she had continued to maintain these rooms within her home that she didn't ever go into,
Mm.
coupled with the fact that it was her husband never saw the value in making decorative decisions. So
Mhm.
she had never really developed a strong sense of self. So the home in itself was, she was living in an environment that had no correlation to who she was innately. She had bereavement papers everywhere. She was with a number of bereavement groups that she met with weekly.
Mhm.
Her dining room was filled with that paperwork, and her living room had fold up chairs so that she could be ready should they come to her house. They were swapping homes with one of the
Mhm.
groups and coming periodically. And so she was living with the reminders of the trauma, reminders of the stress of not really fully developing her sense of self. Still, the power dynamic that had existed in her relationship was being carried over after his passing. And the memory of her son in the room, what that had not been changed. So one of the things that I did in the remodel was to shift the lack of connectivity in the floor plan to a grand connectivity,
Mhm.
meaning that if you have a piece of furniture over here and you have a piece of furniture over here, I could illustrate it. If I'm a piece of furniture and you're coming into your home and I'm facing this way, or worse yet, this way, I'm not connecting to you. But
Mhm.
if I face you this way as a piece of furniture, you feel more drawn in. And then you start to think about, well, what would I do if I'm standing at the stove? I have before and after pictures on my website that are interesting to see. You really get the sense of how it felt in the original state and then how it
Mhm.
felt afterwards. And part of it was defining her voice. Part of it was bringing in light. We know that light, hearing water, they've done clinical psychological studies on not just hearing water, but also setting up a cross breeze in your home between
Mhm.
two windows. Just having that slight breeze on your skin can make you immediately feel more comforted. Light, have, have many studies have done with light and depression. So
Mhm.
in her case, I moved the kitchen from one area to another, allowing for sliding glass doors, and then opened up the wall. So this would be opening up the wall, but then imagine if you saw through this. It's
Mhm.
so between the kitchen, which had a hallway in between, and then the dining room, we opened up both walls to see through like a giant rectangle
Mhm.
and put a banquette at one, and then a passing station through the dining room. So it just became more easy to live there, more practical. And all of that opened up the light flow. It flooded more light into the home. We were able then to create more of a cross breeze for her by putting in the sliding glass doors
Mhm.
strategically. We were able to create a better flow with the floor plan. So all of these are aspects that we can all relate to that are healthy for all human beings in
Right.
terms of our mental health. I could go on for hours and hours on a myriad of ways that the space affects the mental health, but I hope that gives you, at least some ways to think about it.
Yeah, that was really interesting, and I think all of us know to some degree because we feel it. You
Yeah.
know that how we're affected, or if we change something, we can feel that change right away in us. So it's really good to hear from you. I mean, because that obviously is your business, and you know more. But I think it's easy to accept and realize that because we've all felt it in
Yeah.
in some way. And I really like that those photos are on your website, because just looking at them kind of tells the story and creates the feeling. Um, we are going to wrap it up, Kim. I know we could go on because this is so fascinating, and we all have spaces we're living in. So it's so important to consider these, different aspects of our space and, how that affects us. I do want to say that we had a comment, and it was just Dawn Mazzone saying, hello, Kim and Naven. So that was nice.
Oh, hi, Dawn.
And she said, such a blessing. This is Dawn, still such a blessing that this woman had you to work with, Kim, which is true. That's a good point, Dawn, that
thank you. It was a real
what you did for her under such, that's a particularly dramatic, scenario. But I think that's right. She was very lucky to meet up with you. I do want to tell everyone that I put Kim's, a link to her website is under the video. But Kim, if you want to mention it before we close, in case somebody does want to get in touch with you, you can tell them the best way to do that.
Thank you. On my website's contact page, you can contact me there. My email is kim@kimcolwelldesign.com, and Colwell has no D, it's COLWELL, and design is singular. My Instagram is the same. I wouldn't want to connect with you, so please feel free to reach out and ask any questions. I'd love to offer people, Naven, a special discount if you want to work with me.
That, Kim, because you went out a little bit. Can you repeat that?
Yes, absolutely. I'd love to offer a special discount to your people, Naven, just to your community. It would be half off of the first hour. Usually I'm $250 per hour, and I do Zoom sessions on interior psychology, feng shui, home refresh, and then of course full service design. And so half off for your community for the first hour, and that would be $125 instead of $250.
Great. Thank you,
and
Kim.
Thank you. And I also want to say once a month I teach a certification feng shui class that's really dynamic. My mother, Melinda Joy Miller, set up the curriculum initially. I've been teaching this class for over 10 years and have added some spins myself, a little bit more psychology and more design tips as well. But it's really a neat class that, again, I'm very honored to carry on such great work that I grew up with. And I really just appreciate you having me and just getting into a discussion like this. Just something,
so
we all can relate to. We all have a space, and I hope that some of the things that we've spoken about will allow us all to kind of reflect differently and think about things and notice more in your space to impart a positive shift.
Kim, for this feng shui class, how can people find that? Would that be on your website, a link
Yes,
to it?
it is. Yes, it is. It's on the website under the link. The navigation link is called workshops. And on that workshop page, there are a number of different classes that I offer, feng shui being one of them. And if you want to see the photos that I talked about, I believe they're on, if you go to Studio Services and click on either, I believe it's interior psychology or color therapy. Those are two different types of sessions that I offer. And at the bottom, there are a number of before and after pictures, and you kind of slide the arrow, slide to the right to see the before and to the left to see the after.
And I find the before and after pictures really helpful. I enjoy looking at that. And your website is very beautiful.
Thank you.
Just as soon as I opened it, I saw colors that really attracted me. But I like that you have a lot of images on the website for people to look at, because I find that very helpful when I'm looking at, you get that good image and to get the feeling with it. So I really like that. So I think everyone knows how to reach you, Kim. You know, would highly recommend. Kim is just really talented and creative, but just a genuinely, such a heart-centered person. And so I think anyone that signs up to work with you, has that opportunity. There's going to be a lot of benefits that go just beyond design. So I would highly recommend seeking Kim out if you're looking to make some changes or just want some feedback on what you do already have in place. So thank you so much, Kim, for joining me today, because it was such a blessing and I was looking forward to it. And I know all of our viewers who listen in, I want to remind people, if you listen to this later and you want to leave a comment, you can still do that, and I'll make sure that Kim sees it if it appears later to answer you. So thank you so much, Kim. I want to remind everyone that Wade at Forest is next Thursday. Again, we had a glitch last Thursday getting Wade into the studio, so we will talk with him next week. And hopefully you'll be able to come back and we'll continue this another time, Kim.
I'd love it. Nathan, thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining in. See you next week. Bye.